In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where the Imperium of man battles against the encroaching chaos of the galaxy, there exist horrors beyond comprehension. On the desolate frontier world of Mortara, an Imperial base stands as a lone sentinel against the darkness. But an ancient forgotten terror stirs beneath its feet, the Necron Flayed Ones. The wind howled over the barren plains of Mortara, carrying with it the scent of death and decay. Captain Julius Verax, commander of the Imperial outpost, gazed out from the battlements, his eyes scanning the lifeless horizon. The base was a bulwark of mankind's might, but in the heart of its commander, an unspoken fear lingered.
"Report, Sergeant."
Turning to face his second-in-command, Sergeant Lorne.
"All quiet, sir. The men are uneasy. They say they hear whispers in the wind."
Lorne replied, his voice tinged with unease. Verax scoffed.
"Superstitious nonsense. Maintain vigilance. The Emperor protects."
Lorne gave a stiff nod, but didn't move right away. He stood in silence for a moment, staring into the darkness beyond the perimeter.
"Sir, what if the men are right? What if it's not just the wind?"
Verax stared at the sergeant, his jaw clenched.
"Then we hold the line anyway. That's what soldiers do."
That night, the base was shaken to its core. The stillness shattered with the blaring wail of klaxons and the crimson flash of emergency luminators. Alarms screamed like dying men, echoing through the steel corridors. Captain Verax and Sergeant Lorne rushed through the flickering corridors to the command center, their boots pounding on the metal flooring as Vox messages cut in and out in a garbled mess of static and screams.
"Command, this is Watchpost Theta. We're under attack."
The transmission dissolved into a wet, gurgling noise. They burst into the control room. Servitors twitched at their consoles, trying to stabilize the feeds. The main monitor bank flared to life in a jagged sequence, and what they saw twisted the gut of every man present. The perimeter feeds showed scenes of slaughter.
"I don't understand. What are they?"
Lorne breathed. Figures moved with unnatural grace, skeletal shapes cloaked in flayed skin, their metallic claws drenched in blood. The guards stationed at the outer gates never had a chance. The creatures didn't rush. They didn't need to. They blinked in and out of existence, emerging from shadows, walls, even the ground itself. And when they struck, it was swift and surgical. One camera caught a guardsman frozen in place, staring in horror as a flayed one tore the skin from his comrade in a single motion. Then the feed went black.
"Those aren't orcs,"
Verax muttered.
"No, they're Necrons, but not like any I've seen,"
Lorne whispered. The room fell silent, save for the trembling hum of failing power nodes.
"Sound the full alarm,"
Verax ordered.
"Rally the men. All squads to defensive positions. I want overlapping fields of fire. If it moves and it's not one of us, drop it."
They emerged from the command bunker into a world of flickering firelight and panic. The base was a storm of shouting voices, las fire bursts, and the rapid report of autocannons. Shadows danced along the walls, some human, some not.
"Hold the line,"
Verax bellowed as he took position behind a sandbag barrier, bolt pistol in hand. Across the yard, a group of flayed ones erupted from the ground in a shower of stone and dirt. One landed atop a Vox operator, driving its claws through the man's chest before peeling the flak armor off like wrapping. The creature let out a rasping metallic hiss that sounded disturbingly close to laughter.
"Fire! Light them up!"
Lorne shouted. The guardsmen opened fire. Lasbolts lanced through the darkness, but the Necrons were fast, too fast. They blurred across the field, their movements erratic and jerking, like broken puppets animated by something unnatural. One soldier screamed, spinning in place as he realized his arm had been severed without even seeing the blow come. Another was dragged into the shadows mid-sentence, his voice cut off with a sickening crunch.
Sir, they're phasing through the walls! We can't form a line!
A Voxcaster cried. Verax ducked as a Flayed One leapt over the barricade, its claws swiping for his throat. He rolled, fired, and the bolt round caught it in the chest, staggering it just long enough for Lorne to unload his Lazrafel into its exposed cranial plates.
Keep moving! Keep them off balance!
Verax barked.
No bottlenecks! They'll come through the floor!
The battle raged deep into the night. The sounds of war, laser guns, metal shrieks, human agony blended into a hellish symphony. By the time the eastern perimeter collapsed, half the base was already gone, swallowed by the void of panic and the glint of steel. And still, the Flayed Ones came. The monitors showed scenes of carnage. The guards at the perimeter were being slaughtered by assailants that seemed to appear out of thin air skeletal figures, shrouded in tattered cloaks of human skin, their metallic limbs glistening in the moonlight. The Necron Flayed Ones had awakened.
Hold your ground!
Verax shouted as rifle fire flashed through the darkness.
They're wearing Private Kelser's face!
One of the guardsmen screamed.
Emperor, help us!
Verax rallied his men, leading them into the fray. The Flayed Ones were relentless, their ancient claws weapons tearing through armor and flesh with ease. But these Necrons sought more than just killing. They were driven by a grotesque hunger, stripping the skin from their victims and draping it over their own metallic forms in a macabre parody of humanity. The screams came before the gunfire, short, agonizing. Then the sound, metallic, slithering, something that didn't belong to anything living. Verax heard a soldier whispering a prayer behind him as the emergency lights flashed red. The battle raged throughout the night, the Imperial guardsmen fighting desperately against an enemy that knew neither fear nor pain. As dawn broke, Verax and a handful of survivors regrouped in the command bunker.
We must evacuate,
Verax declared, his face pale with shock.
We can't hold against these abominations.
But as they prepared to flee, they discovered the true extent of the horror. The Flayed Ones had infiltrated the bunker, moving unseen through the shadows. They were not just hunters. They were infiltrators, sowing terror and confusion.
Stay with me, Sergeant,
Verax growled, dragging him through a shattered hatch. Lorne coughed blood.
Captain, you saw it, that thing. It laughed.
Then we'll make sure it doesn't laugh again.
The base descended into chaos, each soldier suspecting his comrade of being a skin-clad monster. Trust eroded, leaving only paranoia and fear. In this atmosphere of dread, the Flayed Ones thrived, picking off the guardsmen one by one. Sergeant Lorne, gripped by terror, stumbled upon a horrifying scene. In the medical bay, a Flayed One stood over the bodies of fallen comrades, its claws delicately peeling skin from flesh, draping it over itself like a ghastly cloak. Its face, if it could be called that, was a mockery of a human visage, the skin ill-fitting over its metallic skull. Lorne's scream alerted the creature. In a moment, it was upon him, its claws sinking into his flesh. But before it could finish its gruesome work, Verax arrived, firing his bolt pistol. The Flayed One staggered back, the impact of the bolts tearing through its stolen skin. Verax grabbed Lorne, dragging him to safety.
We need to get off this planet, he gasped. These things, they're not just killing us, they're wearing us.
The survivors made a desperate break for the evacuation shuttle, a battered Valkyrie gunship parked beyond the inner courtyard. Smoke choked the hallways as they moved, weapons drawn, nerves frayed to threads. The emergency illuminators flickered like dying stars, casting long, twitching shadows that played tricks on the eye. Captain Verax led the way, bolt pistol clutched tightly in one hand, his other arm bracing Sergeant Lorne, who limped beside him, blood seeping from a deep gash in his side.
Keep moving, damn it,
Verax growled, more to himself than to the others.
We're not dying in this tomb.
I can make it.
Lorne hissed through clenched teeth, his face pale, slick with sweat.
Just don't let them take me. Don't let them wear me.
Verax didn't answer. He didn't have to. Behind them, gunfire echoed, short bursts, then silence. The last defensive team was gone. The Flayed Ones didn't speak, didn't roar, didn't taunt. They just came, silent and methodical, their claws tapping on steel with a rhythm that reminded Verax of slow, deliberate applause.
We're close,
he muttered, glancing at a cracked Auspex readout.
Past that bulkhead.
As they reached the final corridor, a familiar screech tore through the air. One of the skin-cloaked monsters dropped from a ventilation shaft, landing with an inhuman grace. Its skull was wrapped in a shroud of human faces, stitched together with wire and gore.
Down!
Verax shoved Lorne aside and fired. Bolts slammed into the creature's chest, shredding the stolen skin but barely slowing its advance. Lorne, gritting his teeth, raised his last rifle and fired a shot straight into the thing's eye socket. The Flayed One recoiled, shuddered, and collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs.
You see?
Lorne gasped.
Still got it.
Verax gave him a sharp nod, then helped him up.
Remind me to decorate you for that, assuming we live.
They pushed through the final hatch, and there it was. The Valkyrie, still powered, still waiting. Its engines hummed with promise, a rare sound of salvation in a world filled with screams. Verax turned back.
Move, go now!
A handful of survivors stumbled in behind them, eyes wide, some muttering prayers, others simply numb. They all bore wounds, physical and mental. One soldier clutched a bloody data slate. Another still had someone else's skin stuck to their boot. As the last of them boarded, the hatch began to close. And then they saw them. Dozens of Flayed Ones emerging from the fog and flame, gliding across the courtyard with that same jerking, unnatural grace. Their claws gleamed red with fresh blood. Some wore full suits of Imperial flak armor, trophies, mockeries. One reached out as the doors sealed. Its claws scraped down the hatch with a sound like razors across bone. Inside, silence. The survivors stared at each other, breathing hard, weapons still raised. Lorne collapsed onto a bench, eyes wide and unfocused.
They were inside the walls. I could feel them like they were watching from under our skin.
Verax stood near the viewport, watching the base shrink below as the Valkyrie ascended into the clouds. Fires still burned. Corpses littered the ground.
That wasn't a battle,
he said quietly.
That was a harvest.
Lorne looked up at him, voice barely a whisper.
Do you think they'll follow?
Verax didn't turn.
They don't need to. They're patient, and there are other worlds.
The gunship vanished into the sky, leaving Mortara behind. But the horror was far from over. Somewhere, buried deep in the earth, the Necron tomb stirred once more, its doors open and hungry. And the Flayed Ones waited, for flesh, for fear, for the next harvest. The Flayed Ones were a plague, a terror that would spread throughout the galaxy. And somewhere, in the dark recesses of space, the ancient tomb worlds of the Necron stirred, ready to unleash their skinless harvest upon an unsuspecting galaxy. The war for the survival of humanity was not just fought against the living, but also against the undying horrors of a long-forgotten past. In the 41st millennium, the line between life and death is blurred, and sometimes death is not the worst fate that can befall a soldier of the Imperium.